Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to episode 7 of Count Chocula Decrypted. It has been a while since I've done one of these. It's been a few months. You're gonna have to bear with me here. I am still currently fighting off a pretty severe case of the flu. Uh, might have even been some pneumonia or what have you. I'm not sure. It's still lingering with me. Um, I'm I'm still losing my voice. It's been going on the better part of about 2.5 weeks now that I've been fighting this illness. Uh, some people were like, "Oh, you got to get tested," and I got tested for COVID back in. I think it was back in September or something like that. I mean, what good is it for me to be tested? I don't really care. Uh, I've had bad bouts with the flu before, pneumonia before in years past. It's probably way worse than any kind of any COVID related thing I could have. I would almost at this point I would almost hope that I had COVID over the flu. But yeah, about 3 or 4 years ago, I had a really bad case, and this one it seems to hit me like every 3 or 4 years. I'll have some mild cases where I'll get over it 2 or 3 days, but man, this one's really kicked my ass. But anyway, I'm not here to talk about my medical problems. But you will have to bear with me. I will be taking some drinks from time to time because it's probably going to be the longest that I've tried to talk uh, in 2 or 3 weeks. To be honest with you, so I know for a fact I'm going to lose my voice at some point. So, like I said, I apologize in advance and bear with me. What's this show about? Like I said, this is episode 7. My previous show, I had talked about some old Spider-Man black suit controversy, and every once in a while, I'll get into some recent stuff that I'm interested in when it comes to comic books. But for someone that's never listened, what is this show about? This show is me focusing on some of the positive stuff that I loved as a kid, going back to the 70s and 80s, particularly how it goes back to Marvel Comics. My love for old Bronze era Marvel Comics. That's basically what I've been talking about to this point. So I haven't delved out of the 80s yet at all. I lost interest in comic books, to be honest with you, after the 80s. I mean, I still had interest, but it wasn't such a big deal to me after the 80s. So anyway, today I'm going to be focusing on things from the 70s, and I try to keep things positive here. I try to talk about the things that I love, and the main topic of this episode is going to be one of the creators who really, we've gotten some really bad news about him in just since December. He kind of broke the news to the comic industry. He had been retired from comic books due to health issues, and I am talking about my second favorite artist. I've let it known in previous episodes. My all-time favorite artist, all-time favorite comic book artist is John Byrne. I mean, I've got the John Byrne, I've got the X-Men Days of Future Past shirt on. I've fanboyed John Byrne, but today we're going to be fanboying my second favorite all-time comic book artist. So, but before I get into that, I've got some recent things that I'm going to be talking about. So let me bring some stuff up here. Just wanted to say that, yeah, this podcast is available on Spotify and a few other outlets, but this is going to be the first time I'm going to be recording the video for this for YouTube, so as well. So I will have some visuals. Hopefully I'll keep doing hopefully I can keep doing the YouTube thing, and things can grow from there. But that since the last time I've done a show back in October, there's been quite a few things that have hit the streaming services, and some new movies have come out. I finally got to see the Eternals. Now let me say that I also saw on opening day, I saw Spider-Man No Way Home. I'm not going to really talk about that this episode. I'm going to save that for a future episode. Just to let you know, I love Spider-Man No Way Home. I did see it the very first day it came out. I saw the early show, and the theater wasn't packed, but it was about 3/4 full, and had a really good time. Probably not going to go see it again in the theater. Once is enough. There's a lot going on in that movie, but it's all nostalgia based. Basically, was the big draw of that movie. But let's talk about the Eternals a little bit. I finally got to see the Eternals. The Eternals had been, up until just a few days ago when they released it on Disney Plus, the Eternals had been basically the only Marvel property that I hadn't seen up to then. And I made the decision not to go see the Eternals in the theater. I'm so glad that I made that decision. I absolutely despised this movie. I mean, what you can see here, the casting was probably the biggest deterrent for me to actually go see Eternals in the movie theater and to spend my money. I have Disney Plus, so I said, you know what, I'm just going to wait the extra 2 months, 2 or 3 months, or whatever it was, to see the Eternals. It's just not worth going to sit there. And I saw that it's over 2.5 hours, and I am so glad that I did not go and have to anguish through this movie, this embarrassment of a movie, frankly. I've seen Black Widow, I've seen Shang-Chi. They've gotten a lot of hate in the new phase of the MCU, but I actually enjoyed those two movies. I'm not gonna cheerlead for them. I'm not gonna say that they were the greatest movies. They don't stack up to some of the better MCU movies, which I've had a chance, since I've been ill, I've had a chance to go back and watch almost every single MCU movie again. And so the Eternals hit on Disney Plus just the other day, and it got me going back to reading some of the original Eternals. Now I understand that they've kind of rebooted the Eternals for the comic book. The original Eternals was a failed comic book from the start. What had happened was Jack Kirby, famously Jack Kirby is, was a big time name in comic books, a big reason why Marvel is where it is today. Him and Stan Lee co-created the majority of the characters. He even co-created some of the characters that Stan Lee had nothing to do with. Captain America, for one. Jack Kirby co-created Captain America with Joe Simon. But Jack Kirby was a huge name in comic books, probably the leading reason why we're seeing a lot of this stuff today. You're talking about Fantastic Four, the Hulk. Didn't have anything to do with Spider-Man, but you've got Fantastic Four, the Hulk, just about everything else. A good half of the really popular characters, Jack Kirby had some sort of say-so in the design of the creation, and he was definitely ahead of his time visual-wise. But there was a certain type of comic book that fit his visual style. And as the years passed in the late 60s, Jack Kirby had a falling out with, the people in charge at Marvel, Stan Lee, Larry Lieber, whoever, I think even Roy Thomas was coming up at the time, taking over the editor position from Stan Lee. But Jack Kirby leaves and goes to DC. And, big name, Jack Kirby. He creates the New Gods. He creates OMAC, Commandy. Nothing that's really. I shouldn't say that. The New Gods have been very influential. You're still seeing a lot of stuff in DC today that goes back to Jack Kirby's influence. But the New Gods is about the New Gods is about the only thing. Everything else never really took hold over at DC. And Darkseid was all. I believe the Darkseid character, the Apocalypse and the New Genesis and the All Father, and he created a lot of these. He created this universe inside of a universe at DC. Darkseid character, I believe, was already created. He was. I think he first appeared in Superman, Jimmy Olsen, my pal Jimmy Olsen, kind of wasn't like an important character or anything, but Jack Kirby incorporated Darkseid into the New Gods. So I'm not confessing to be some sort of expert on DC Jack Kirby. Like I said, I don't talk a lot about DC on this show. But what had happened was Jack Kirby came back to Marvel. I guess Jack Kirby felt slighted by Marvel that he wasn't getting a lot of the recognition for the co-creation of a lot of those characters. So Jack Kirby comes back to Marvel. This is when I'm first starting to get into comic books, is when Jack Kirby comes back to Marvel. So, Jack Kirby comes back. He does a lot of cover work. He has a little run on Captain America. To me, it wasn't. It was a big deal at the time. Jack Kirby, King Kirby is coming back to Marvel, and it was a big selling point. But I think to kind of coerce him to come back, they said, "We're going to give you some free reign on some characters. You create some characters." Jack Kirby wanted to be like the sole creator. He just didn't want to do art. He wanted to create his own thing. So the most popular thing that Jack Kirby, when he returned to Marvel, besides doing covers, he did some awesome covers for Captain America. He did covers for the Avengers, 1975, 1976, on into 77. Like I said, he had that short-lived run of Captain America. At the time I was reading Captain America, I think it might have boosted sales for a little bit because Captain America had been slumping in the sales. Not as bad as it was later on as Captain America continued to slide. And a lot of those original Kirby creations continued to slide in the sales a little bit when you get into the 80s. And they had to have an influx of new blood come in to kind of revive the characters a little bit. To me, when I was a kid, Jack Kirby seemed dated because a lot of Marvel had you go to the store around 77, 78, they're already doing reprints of classic comic books. And so this is how I knew Jack Kirby, besides the short little run of Captain America when I first started getting into comic books in the first place. But this is how I knew Jack Kirby. And to me, Jack Kirby was old school. He was past. I didn't enjoy. Now I appreciate Jack Kirby's work much more now than I did when I was a kid. I didn't want to see a lot of Jack Kirby stuff. I loved reading the old reprints of the classic characters, but it just looked so dated. Once you've seen John Byrne, once you've seen the guy I'm going to talk about here in a little bit, George Perez, once you've seen Frank Miller come on the scene, or Walt Simonson, and even guys, Bill Sienkiewicz, even John Romita. John Romita at the time looked a little dated, but even his artwork looked more modern than Jack Kirby. But so that's what I remember about Jack Kirby when I first came into starting to consuming Marvel Comics, 1975, 1976. And I remember seeing the Eternals on the rack, and every once in a while I'd pick up an Eternal comic book. I never bought. I think there was one issue of the Eternals that I had my mom buy me, because it just didn't fit into the Marvel universe, and that was kind of the promise that they gave Jack Kirby. We're gonna give you your own little sandbox outside of the Marvel universe, and here you go, go play in it. And I think the Eternals lasted about 19 issues. It was never a big seller. I think there was some interest peaked in 76 when he first started, first few issues. And there were like zero references to the Marvel universe until like year 2. And then they started, I think there was a reference to like Ben Grimm. And then they had like a cosmic powered android Hulk that Icarus fought. Icarus was the main character. But my point with the Eternals movie I had is I just don't understand why it exists. When I saw a few years ago, I saw they laid out their little roadmap for the breakdown of the new phase of the Marvel universe, and I saw the Eternals on there. I was just like, of course I had promise, because I had read the majority of Jack Kirby's Eternals. It's a different type of read. It's a little more sophisticated than at the time, where I'm 8, 9 years old. It's a little more dry. It's a little more sophisticated. There's not a whole lot of action. There's a lot of mythos behind it, where you have like the 3 species on the planet, the new planets that form. You've got the deviants, you've got the humans, and you've got the Eternals. They all spring from the same species in Jack Kirby's version of the comic book. And you have the Celestials come, and every 50 years they judge. And the Eternals are basically just there to fight off the deviants. They totally changed. They totally changed that basic premise for the Eternals movie, because in the Eternals movie, the whole purpose is to form Earth. They're going to birth new Celestials. So Asherim, one of the Celestials, is going to make a judgment upon mankind if it's worthy or not. But the Eternals, supposedly the Eternals know the whole time that they're not supposed to get attached to the humans. They're just supposed to fight off the deviants that have gotten out of control from the Celestials. That's kind of a big change. The deviants in the Eternals movie is a huge change from the deviants. The premise of the deviants in the original Jack Kirby comic book. They're not just monsters. They're actually technologically advanced. They are evil, and they want to take over the Earth. But it's just the Eternals movie just served no purpose for me as far as how it fit into the Marvel Cinematic Universe. They did mention, I think they had a character, Dane Whitman, who is the Black Knight, who is a mainstay of the Marvel, the actual Marvel universe. He's been in the Super Teams. He's been in the Avengers. It's a complicated history with that character, and I feel like but he had nothing to do with the Eternals in the Jack Kirby's Eternals in the comic books. Absolutely nothing. I feel like they just kind of threw that in. But my number one issue with the Eternals movie is the casting. The the main Eternal is Icarus. Okay, I can live with. I think as the actor's Richard Madden. I really haven't paid much attention to. I didn't give too much thought about. I mean, you can see that it doesn't stack up to Kirby's original, version of the Eternals. If you're not going to, if you're not going to try to honor that original Eternals, the original Eternals, then what is the purpose? I just don't understand the rebranding of these characters, these obscure characters that no one really read anyway. I mean, the Eternals were canceled. The original Kirby Eternals only lasted less than 2 years. It wasn't a big seller. It was just kind of appeasing Kirby. Here you go. Here's your thing. If it's a big hit, okay, that's fine. But if it's not, it's going to get canceled. That's the way Marvel worked back then. Didn't matter who you were. If the book didn't sell, your book got canceled. Didn't matter what the name behind the book was. So the casting is just horrible. They've got Selma Hayek as Ajax. Ajax is kind of Ajax, one of the main Eternals, probably the second main Eternal, but behind Icarus. In the comic book, Icarus was the main attraction. He was the Superman type character. He was the focal point of probably 80% of all Eternals comic books. He battled that Hulk android. Most of the fighting scenes was Icarus in the comic books. Ajax was kind of the behind the scenes Eternal. He was kind of like the liaison between the Celestials. They called him kind of like the Eternal Prime. He was the one that he was the one that could he was the one that could communicate directly with the Celestials. And then you've got some really bad casting. So anyway, in the movie, they not only do they have Selma Hayek as the Ajax, makes no sense. Absolutely makes any sense. Then they end up culling her off. I mean, the plot is horrible. So spoiler alert, that character in Ajax ends up getting killed off, which makes no sense to me. Then they've got Makari, who the kind of the running joke in the original Kirby Eternals is that the humans base their mythology off of they are God. They're basically God creatures. Godlike eternal creatures, but they mispronounced their names. So Mercury, Jack Kirby couldn't use Mercury, so he used Makari. So the speedster, he's kind of a younger Eternal, kind of the Flash type character. They gender swap the character and make it a deaf character. I just don't get it. I don't see how that serves the story. Then you can go on and on. Probably and what I'm not showing on this picture here, what's not showing is Angelina Jolie's character, ironically, is probably the most like character as far as the Kirby comic book goes. She's a little crazy. She's a little unpredictable, wild, Athena. And the joke is it's not Athena, it's Thena, drop the A. But in the movie, the Angelina Jolie's Thena character is absolutely the most like any of the Jack Kirby characters. The most like the Thena in the comic book. I'm not going to spend too much longer. You've got this Druid character who is the cousin of Icarus. In the comic book, he's the villain. I mean, besides the deviants, he's the guy that's trying to throw a wrench in the works. He's the bad guy, basically, Druig. And, it's just, like I said, I would like to go in more detail, but the plot is just a mess. Do yourself a favor and skip this one. But they've got some more characters. You've got Sprite, who is actually they gender swapped that character as well. Sprite is a male. He's kind of like a trickster type character in the Kirby comic book. And then they've added a few new characters. You've got a Circe who was in love with in the movie, love with Icarus, and then they had a falling out, and then she's in love with Dane Whitman, the Black Knight character. So the plot is just a mess in the movie. I had a hard time even staying focused on it. Right away, I could tell it was nothing to honor the Jack Kirby Eternal. So that would have been much more interesting to me. I just don't see this is just basically, let's see if we can make a Bollywood MCU movie. So that was my disappointment with the Eternals, but be honest with you, I didn't really expect much. This should have been a Disney Plus series, maybe. To me, it's a shame. If they would have put this type of budget and this type of effort into a more significant Marvel franchise like the Inhumans that came out of that, once again, Jack Kirby had a hand in designing that. The Inhumans, instead of that failed, pathetic TV show, if they would have actually made the Eternals, I wish I could transpose the Inhumans on the Eternals. Like, get rid of the Eternals movie and put a Inhumans movie in there. Both have kind of the same Kirby vibe to them. So to me, that would have been more serving, more fitting to the within the Marvel Cinematic Universe. They could also maybe blend that into the like a new Fantastic Four franchise for the MCU. But so that's that's kind of like my little rant about the Eternals. I'm not going to go into a lot of the plot of the Eternals movie. It's just not worth the time. So to me, I mean, if you've got Disney Plus, you might as well watch it if you're a big MCU fan. But to me, this is a throwaway movie. They did have a end credit scene. I'll say one more thing. They had an end credit scene with Harry Styles, the singer. I don't know much about him. I know he's popular with like teeny boppers. He's basically a Justin Timberlake type, but they have him. They introduce him at the end as the brother of Thanos, Eros Star Fox. So another character I never really cared about. Another character that they introduced in the early '80s, and they slapped him into the Avengers and trying to get the popularity. Try to kind of force that character upon people. Not really a character I was ever interested in, but who knows what they do with that? It might be interesting. I hope to God that they're not thinking about doing the Eternals sequel, Eternals Part 2. I don't see how they're going to do that with the reception that this movie has basically gotten. I know it's been killed on Rotten Tomatoes. The vast majority of people have just seem to have not enjoyed the Eternals. So, who knows? To me, it gives heavy competition to the worst MCU movie to date, which for me is Captain Marvel, hands down. Still, Captain Marvel to me is the worst MCU movie. The Eternals is going to be right up there, number 2, baby. So I'd have to think about what my third least favorite. Probably like Ant-Man and the Wasp or something like that. I didn't really enjoy that as well. But anyway, that's enough about the Eternals. I'm going to move on to talk about something outside of the Marvel, something outside of the Marvel universe a little bit. I think I did. I already have that. Yeah, I already had that up. There's some. I'm gonna have a little technical issues with the video part. Kind of a new thing. I'm used to just recording this for Spotify. So if all goes well, I'll continue doing this for, and posting this on YouTube channel. So I wanted to talk about the Book of Boba Fett. It's another thing that has come out as I'm recording this. We're 3 issues deep into the Book of Boba Fett, and there has been a lot of negativity. It says right here, Star Wars fans roast the Book of Boba Fett, not an ounce of Star Wars. Okay. I didn't really go into... I read this article a little bit. It says a growing number of Star Wars fans have taken to social media to mock the most recent episode of the Book of Boba Fett. The streets of Mos Espa, and what they're making fun of, and this is a legitimate criticism. Let me backtrack before I get into this. Let me backtrack a little bit with Boba Fett. A lot of people that I interact with online, not a lot of people, but a few people that I interact with online kind of mock Boba Fett. Like, he is not a worthy character. He's just kind of a character that was like, hey, look at this cool Star Wars character. Doesn't really have a past. He's a failed bounty hunter. Darth Vader did all the dirty work, got Han Solo, and basically he was a courier to bring carbonite frozen Han Solo to Jabba the Hutt. So let me go back to my original memories of Boba Fett, and this is fun to me because I was 8 years old when the original Star Wars came out, and I had a buddy that moved into the neighborhood shortly after the original Star Wars came out. His name was Ken Marsh, and he was almost a year younger than me. But he was a pretty smart kid, and he was up on a lot of even at 8 years old, he was up on a lot of the things. He was much older than 8 years old as far as his awareness of what was going on in like pop culture at the time, much more than I was. I was into Marvel comic books. When Star Wars came out in 1977, I was already deep into Marvel comic books. Star Wars was not going to surpass Marvel comic books in my mind. Even after I saw the movie, I love the movie. Yeah, we were fighting each other with lightsabers. When the winter, after Empire Strikes Back, when the wintertime came out, we were out there. We were on the planet Hoth. We did all that stuff. We were Star Wars nuts. But it was always second fiddle to Marvel comic books for me. Not so with my friend Ken Marsh. So he had an older brother that was really into this stuff. Older brother was like 4 or 5 years older at the time, who was really into Marvel comic books, really into the Star Wars stuff. He had older sisters that were really into pop culture, everything. The Beatles. When I was 8 years old, I didn't know who the Beatles were. To me, it was the Bee Gees. I even remember getting in an argument with him and his sister. I said the Bee Gees are way more popular than the Beatles. That was my ignorance at the time. I wasn't keeping up on 8, 9 years old. I wasn't up to snuff on the pop culture stuff outside of Marvel Comics. Of course, I love Godzilla and stuff that was on television, but he was really, really, he had his finger on the pulse of this stuff. So what I'm getting at is he was the one that led me on to Boba Fett. He would always get the sci-fi magazines. I wouldn't buy the sci. His older brother, his older sister would always get the sci-fi magazines, and we would get to read them. And he said there's this really cool character, Boba Fett. And I ended up seeing Boba Fett on the Star Wars holiday special, which I didn't like. When I was a kid, I didn't like that Star Wars holiday special. I'm like, I've seen the movie. This is silly. I was like, okay, it's kind of cool for a second, but we made fun of it as kids. We made fun of that, but you got to see a little sneak peek of this character, Boba Fett. But my first memory of being excited about the Boba Fett character was because of my friend Ken Marsh. He said, look, he was big into the action figures. You couldn't find the Star Wars action figures until like 1978. They weren't to be had in the stores. Famously, you would buy an empty box and then they'd promise you the figures later. My mom wasn't going to buy me those. My mom wasn't going to pay good money for an empty box and say, "Oh, you're going to get those figures later." But when Kenner started catching up to the demand of the market, my friend was like, "They're going to make a new Star Wars movie," and I was like, "Really?" Because I didn't know. I thought that was like a one and done. Later on they had a book before The Empire Strikes Back came out. They had a book called Splinter in the Mind's Eye, and I ended up getting that book and reading that book. But I didn't look at it as there was going to be some big long franchise of Star Wars. And, as a kid, you just don't think that far ahead. Sequels weren't really. I didn't really understand the notion of movie sequels at the time. It's like 1978. But I remember my friend saying they've got an advertisement here where if you buy 4 Star Wars characters and you cut out the proof of purchases and you mail in the proof of purchases, you get a free Boba Fett character. And I was like, well, I don't know anything about Boba Fett except I saw the visual, I saw the picture of Boba Fett, and we were just like, oh, this is going to be the coolest thing. He's going to be in the new Star Wars movie. And they had little sneak peeks of some of the pre-production stuff of the new Empire Strikes Back, which came out in 1980. So Boba Fett. That's it was a cool name. It was a cool visual. And it's like he's going to be a bounty hunter. Now the original Boba Fett design supposedly was for the new like updated stormtrooper. Like they were gonna be the new super version of the like a super elite squad of stormtrooper. But I guess even Empire Strikes Back didn't have that budget. Supposedly they went over budget, and maybe that I think George Lucas said that. Say, okay, we'll just make him a singular character. We'll just make him a bounty hunter. So, but I remember seeing the sneak preview of in the sci-fi magazine of the bounty hunters, and I thought Boba Fett looked neat, and they had the character, but I really liked Bosk. I thought the Bosk character was the one that kind of was like, oh, wow, he looks badass. And then there was a robot in the background, which ended up being IG-88. So I was just as interested as the other bounty hunters. That ended up being a disappointment when I saw the movie. But I remember going to see Empire Strikes Back, and really Boba Fett didn't cross my mind. Now you get to see Boba Fett for like maybe 2 minutes in the movie. He's got a couple lines, and you got to see his cool Slave One spaceship, but you don't know anything about this. You don't know anything about the character. George Lucas said he tried to make the visual of the character kind of copying off like a spaghetti western type gunslinger, which I thought was cool. So that was my earliest memories of being excited about the Boba Fett character, but. A lot of that Empire Strikes Back was such a different tone of a movie than the original Star Wars movie that, I come out as a kid, I'm 11 years old at the time, come out of Empire Strikes Back. I love the movie, don't get me wrong. I love bits and pieces of the movie, but the movie as a whole kind of was like a downer a little bit. It was kind of a darker type movie, and I wasn't ready for. I guess I should have been. I should have been. I should have been prepared because the Empire Strikes Back is the literal title of the movie, but I wasn't prepared for such a kind of a downer. He gets his hand chopped off, but the big thing that overshadowed Boba Fett was Luke, I am your father. Everyone was talking about Darth Vader, the Darth Vader spoiler of being Luke's father, and it overshadowed Boba Fett. I didn't care about Boba Fett during Empire Strikes Back. I did want to get that action figure, so I did end up. I remember we sat down. We sat down at my friend Ken Marsh's kitchen table, and we had cut out our proof of purchases and we mailed them in. We had his older sister help us mail in those proof of purchases for the Boba Fett character, and we couldn't wait. We were like, "Oh, we're gonna have this Boba Fett character. It's gonna be so cool." We don't know what we're gonna do with the action figure. He had tons of action figures. I think I had my mom buy me 4. I think I had Han Solo, Chewbacca, Greedo, and a Stormtrooper, I think, is the ones that I got. But I bought the bare minimum. I wasn't really into the Star Wars action figures that much. I could always go over and just play with my friends because Ken Marsh had them all. I had another friend that had nearly all of them. They were big into those action figures. My friend Ken had the Death Star with the little foam pit, with the little trash compactor monster. He had the X-wing that you push down on the R2-D2, and the wings opened up. The only vehicle that I ended up getting was the TIE Fighter, which I broke one of the wings off of, acting like I was going through a asteroid field after the Empire Strikes Back, and I broke off one of the wings going through the door frame of my buddy's house. But that was the last time my mom bought me one of those. I think she bought me a Cylon Raider from Battlestar Galactica that shot the little pieces, and then I ended up losing those, and the little springs. The little, you pulled out the wings and you could shoot it had a little trigger that you shot the little things. But that leads me up to the Boba Fett character. We waited and waited and waited, and then we got a notice in the mail that the figure had been delayed due to safety reasons, and we were bummed out. And at this point, I'm starting to lose interest. So, but I eventually. Because one of the selling points of the character was that you could launch his rocket pack, which I thought wasn't very practical. It's not a very practical weapon if you look at it, right? He's got to like bend down and then fire. I mean, that's going to take off your head, basically. Just that, I always thought his rocket pack was kind of an impractical. As impractical weapon, but kind of silly. But later on, we get the action figure, and it was cool, but it didn't have the it had a fixed little rocket thing, so that kind of defeated some of the allure of the figure, but. It was the longest time. I remember waiting as a kid for that action figure to come in the mail, and eventually it did. I think he got his first. I'm not sure how that happened, but I think he got his a few weeks before I did. So I was fairly jealous. But like I said, we didn't know anything about the character. The movie came out. he didn't do much in the movie. I mean, the Slave One ship was. I was like, wow, I'd love that. I think he ended up getting that Slave One ship action figure, or vehicle or whatever. But I remember the Return of the Jedi. The one of the selling points for the Return of the Jedi was that Han Solo and Luke Skywalker were going to fight Boba Fett on the Jabba slave, the Jabba slave barge, and that happened. But he still seemed kind of like a little underwhelming at the time. So he gets thrown in the Sarlacc pit. But we always wonder what happened to the Boba Fett character. So now we've got Disney Star Wars. You watch the sequels, and I was so disappointed. The three George Lucas. Did I say sequels? I meant prequels. The three George Lucas prequels, to me, are the worst things. Star Wars related things that have almost ever been, that is like popular mainstream. I have an equal hate for the George Lucas prequels as I do for The Last Jedi and The Rise of Skywalker. I actually like The Force Awakens. A lot of people are like, oh, The Force Awakens, it's all... I had high hopes for J.J. Abrams taking over Star Wars after 2016, seeing The Force Awakens. I had some high hopes. There were some things I really didn't like about it. I never liked the Rey character, and I didn't like Kylo Ren later on in the movie when they had the Adam Driver. They take off his helmet, leave the helmet on the entire time. I thought the beginning Kylo Ren was badass. He stops the laser rifle bolt. I was like, oh man, I'm all in on this. This is cool. J.J. Abrams, yeah, you screwed up Star Trek, but nobody really cares. There's not a big clamoring for nostalgia for Star Trek, the Star Trek franchise. I hate J.J. Abrams' Star Trek, but I had a good feeling about The Force Awakens. I actually enjoyed the movie much more than any of the George Lucas prequels. I hated the George Lucas prequels. I have gone back recently since I've been ill, and I've watched all of the Star Wars. I've gone back. I didn't rewatch Last Jedi or Rise of Skywalker. I didn't need to. I know how garbage those are, but the Disney. I'm not going to sit here and defend Disney Star Wars. I'm not that guy. I hate Disney Star Wars. Outside of The Mandalorian was like that one shining thing but that's Jon Favreau. See, I don't consider Jon Favreau. I just don't know how much he is beholden to Disney Studios execs, because I think he seems to be able to do his own thing, and The Mandalorian was a bright spot. There's no doubt. Dave Filoni, walking Star Wars encyclopedia. Jon Favreau, most things that Jon Favreau gets involved in, I have liked. Iron Man, obviously. He's got his hand in a lot of the Avengers movies, which I really liked. So to me, it's a positive. It's a positive if Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau are involved. The Mandalorian to me, but let's look at this headline here. Star Wars fans roast the Book of Boba Fett, not an ounce of Star Wars. I have to disagree with that. I'm actually enjoying the Book of Boba Fett more than I like the Mandalorian. I'm not sure what people. I'm going to scroll down and look at some of this. I'm not sure what people are trying to get out of the Book of Boba Fett. To me, the Book of Boba Fett all I want to see. I personally am much more interested in. I'm personally much more interested in the happenings straight out of Return of the Jedi. I want to know what happened in the universe. I want to know what happened with the Sarlacc pit. I want to know what happened after Jabba the Hutt was killed. So far, the Book of Boba Fett has addressed all of that. How can you say there's not an ounce of Star Wars? They had the Rancor. In one of the episodes, there's only been 3 episodes so far. Excuse me. They take a prisoner and they're going to threaten to make him talk, and they put him in the Rancor pit. So throw him in the Rancor pit, and then he's like, "Well, the Rancor pit is empty. The Rancor was killed by Luke Skywalker." But they've brought in a new Rancor, like a baby Rancor. This is what I want to see. How is this not an ounce of Star Wars? I mean, what are you trying to get out of the Book of Boba Fett? I want Star Wars lore, the original stuff from the source material, continued in the Book of Boba Fett. I don't want any kind of new storylines. You get to see what happened when you don't get to see what happened, but they refer back to when Jabba the Hutt was killed. Bib Fortuna takes over. I would have liked to seen the overthrow of Bib Fortuna. That would have been great. He's got no business being like a boss anyway, Then you get the references. You get to actually see the two Jabba the Hutt, the Hutt cousins. They refer to the home world of the Hutts. You get to see the Tusken Raiders. You get to see what happened inside the Sarlacc pit. I mean, that's awesome. I wish they would have spent more time with that instead of just having him as a flashback type. I wish they would have actually had a segment where you actually get to see him struggle getting out of the Sarlacc pit, which you do. You get to see it in a flashback form, but it's not very long. It's not a very long scene, but it is kind of a gruesome scene, and you get to kind of see the what happens inside the Sarlacc pit. Jabba the Hutt boasts that you're going to be thrown in the you're going to get thrown into the Sarlacc pit and digested over a course of 1,000 years or whatever. So you get to kind of see what happens, and they have you see a stormtrooper suit. So you're kind of getting a callback from when the stormtroopers went down to look for the droids originally in Tatooine, and maybe one of the stormtroopers fell into a Sarlacc pit at the time. So I mean, when else during the original 3 Star Wars movies were the stormtroopers on Tatooine? I can't remember, but I think the only time is when they were down looking for the droids. Look, sir, droids. One of those deals. So you get to see what happens after Return of the Jedi. This is what I'm looking for the Book of Boba Fett. I am looking for continuation of the Star Wars lore. And that's exactly what I'm getting. I was hoping they would bring a Rancor in. There it is, episode 3. They bring in a baby Rancor for Boba Fett to train they're saying that one of the criticisms is, oh, he's way too nice. He's too forgiving. Well, there was nothing in the past of Boba Fett's character to kind of say that he was some sort of cruel warlord, or he was going to be some kind of cruel boss. He says in episode 1 that he wants to rule not by fear that Jabba did, but by respect. But the unfortunate thing about the Boba Fett character is the origin that goes back to the prequels. I think it's just a lazy origin story. I don't think George Lucas had any idea how to develop the character. They make him a clone of Jango Fett, and then he sees Mace Windu kill, his father, and he has a few flashbacks. In the book of Boba Fett, he has a few flashbacks, and he refers back to where he lived. Now he's on a desert planet where he lived on a planet that was, it was an all water planet. That's the cloning, the planet where the cloners existed. The whole silly clone thing. I know even in the original Star Wars they referred back to the Clone Wars, but I prefer anything. I prefer right now. I prefer anything the Book of Boba Fett episode over anything that has to do with George Lucas prequel stuff. And that even goes to the origin of Boba Fett. I really wish that the character had a different origin. That's the one thing that I kind of cringe when he has flashbacks of being that kid, the Boba Fett child. There's so many they could have done so much better on the origin story of that character. But so anyway, I mean, I'm not. Trust me, I'm not anyway defending Disney Star Wars. I am not a fan of Disney Star Wars. Haven't been, but I enjoy The Mandalorian. But I'm actually looking forward to more Book of Boba Fett than I did The Mandalorian. Now, The Mandalorian, the big selling point of The Mandalorian is you get to eventually get to see Luke Skywalker, and they have the Dark Troopers, and of course, what's his name? The Baby Yoda is the big selling point of The Mandalorian. But all in all, there's a lot of non-Star Wars stuff in The Mandalorian. Of course, I like Gina Carano. I hate the whole Gina Carano controversy. I just don't see how that applies to kind of shows some of the political nastiness of the Disney, what's going on behind the scenes at Disney. If they care about some actor's politics, who cares? She fills the role. I actually think Gina Carano would be an amazing She-Hulk. I mean, I would push to see. I would lobby to see Gina Carano as She-Hulk. I'm not sure who they have cast as She-Hulk. That's actually coming up on the Disney Plus. Disney Plus very soon. That I think Moon Knight is the next, and then they're going to have She-Hulk, and then Kamala Khan, Miss Marvel. But I'm not going to talk. Another thing that happened while I, between the last episode that I had was the Hawkeye Disney Plus, which I enjoyed that as well. Probably won't be talking about that much here. It's just not really. There's not a lot that went on with that. There's no real big controversy with it. It stuck with the comic book quite well, which made me happy. I liked that little run of the Hawkeye where they're kind of trying to blend in Kate Bishop as Hawkeye. I don't hate that. It's not. They're kind of adding in the character. It's not really gender swapping the character. I mean, it is gender swapping the character, but she's. Hawkeye still exists. So, but they didn't force during the Hawkeye Disney Plus show. They never forced that character down your throat. That's one thing I liked about it. I actually found myself drawn to the character a little bit, and that was kind of surprising. But of course, the big selling point of Hawkeye was the return of the Kingpin, and which you're eventually going to get the what's the actor's name? Charlie Cox that plays Matt Murdock, Daredevil. One of the big tragedies that they ended up canceling the Netflix, but it's all coming to light that the reason why that was canceled was, I mean, it was a popular show. It got good ratings, but Disney Plus was the reason. The formation of Disney Plus, the launch of Disney Plus, they were eventually going to take that property back, and eventually, hopefully they do something. The rumors are that they've got season 4 in the works of Daredevil. I hope that comes to light because I'll be right there watching it. But as far as the Book of Boba Fett, it's everything that I was looking for the continuation of Return of the Jedi, because that's basically encapsulates the character, because there's not a lot to go on with the character. It's like, oh, I just want to see what goes on. I want to see what goes on between. I don't care about prequels, and I don't care about 20, 30 years down the road. I want to see what went on between New Hope, Empire Strikes Back, and shortly, the things that happened in the Star Wars universe right after Return of the Jedi. Because that's my wheelhouse. That's what I grew up with. If the prequels never existed, I would never even care. I would not care at all. So that's kind of like that. That's kind of my feeling on the Book of Boba Fett. I'm actually enjoying the Book of Boba Fett more than I did the Mandalorian, and I like the Mandalorian. Don't get me wrong, but it didn't fill in the blanks for what happened after Return of the Jedi to me. It just seemed like an outlier story, much less Star Wars to me than, besides the return of Luke Skywalker taking the child, the Yoda child. It's not Yoda, but what's his name? Gorgu or whatever. I forget what name they put. Yeah, it's a cute little character, but to me, it's not that Star Warsy. So the Book of Boba Fett definitely fills in the blanks much more for me than the Mandalorian. So anyway, that is about all I'm going to say about the Book of Boba Fett. So getting into my main topic here, it's kind of a sad, depressing thing, actually. I want to go down here, and I want to talk about one of the creators. Hopefully this will pop up here. I want to talk about one of the creators of one of my all-time favorite comic book creators, and George Perez. And hopefully I'm saying his name right. I know a lot of people say his name George Perez, and he publicly corrects people a little bit. It's Perez. The emphasis is on, it's a different emphasis. So I'll probably end up saying Perez because that's how I kind of grew up knowing that comic book creator. But recently, it's like, why are you talking about George Perez? Recently, in December, George Perez on his Facebook page, it hasn't been it's no mystery that the people that follow some of these creators knows that George Perez has had a long list of health problems. George Perez is one of the most beloved comic book creators that's ever been. He's best known for his work. Ironically enough, he's best known for his work at DC. But that came after Marvel, and I'll get into some of that. But in December, George Perez, who had retired a few years ago from comic books because he's got bad diabetes problems, which is affecting his eyesight, and he said he just can't do the work anymore. And I believe he's in his 70s, either late 60s, early 70s. So he's got a list of health problems, but I guess he went in for some sort of minor surgery, and he announced that they discovered that he's got like stage 3 pancreatic cancer. And if you know anything about pancreatic cancer, and I'm no medical expert, but I've never heard anything good come out of that diagnosis, and it really sent a wave through the comic book industry. I remember hearing that news, and I was bummed out for an entire day, because George Perez getting into Marvel Comics when I did in 1975, 1976, really, really starting to consume Marvel Comics in 77. George Perez was top of the list of reasons why you would buy a comic book. And why do I have Avengers 141 up on my screen here? Well, simply because this is George Perez's first delve into mainstream comic books. And this came out in 1975. Avengers 141 came out in 1975. And I believe George Perez, the original artist of the Avengers, not the original artist, but the artist at the time of the Avengers was a guy named Rich Buckler, who was also going back and forth doing Fantastic Four. He was a workhorse, and he needed an assistant, and George Perez came on to be basically the fill-in for Rich Buckler. But then he ends up taking over. Rich Buckler was in demand mid-'70s. He did, like I said, he did a lot of work. 1974, 1975, he did a lot of work on Fantastic Four. He was one of the main Marvel workhorses. George Perez came on as his assistant, basically, and I think Marvel gave George Perez a few odd assignments for like horror comics, maybe like Man Wolf, or I forget exactly, but he ends up doing a few issues of Marvel Presents the Guardians of the Galaxy, the original Guardians of the Galaxy, and he does a few issues of the Inhumans, the short-lived Inhumans book, which I believe he did maybe like 5 issues of that, and then I think Gil Kane ended up taking over that book. But like I said, George Perez announced on his Facebook page that it's surgically inoperable. He's diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, and they were trying to get him to to sign up for a lot of the radiation therapy, chemotherapy and all of that. And he announced that he's not going to go through all that. He's just going to let nature take its course. This is his words. I'm not. You can go on his Facebook page and see all of this, but it was very sad because George Perez is known to be one of the nicest guys in comic books ever. Any kind of interview you've ever heard about people that have talked about meeting George Perez, sometimes a lot of these artist guys are, they're standoffish. They've got huge egos. They don't want you prying into. They'll sign something for you, but they're not very friendly guys. They're introverted people. But George Perez was always, as I've heard from other comic book people that I follow on podcasts and stuff like that, no one has ever said anything ill toward George Perez. Now that goes without saying that he had run-ins with other creators. I believe he had a pretty big rivalry with my favorite comic book creator, all-time comic book creator, which is John Byrne. John Byrne and George Perez were the two big ticket items at Marvel. And John Byrne got a lot of recognition when he took over the X-Men. And I think George Perez never really had a steady gig. even though his art was in demand. He never really stayed on a comic book for Marvel that long, and it always baffled me because when I was a kid, when I was going to go pick up a comic book, I would have my mom buy me a issue of the Inhumans, just because I saw George Perez drew the book. So this is I mean, he was a big selling point. If it was John Byrne or George Perez, I would more times than not try to get my mom to buy the comic for me. So no matter what it was, I remember having my mom buy me buy me one or two issues of Marvel Presents the original Guardians of the Galaxy in the mid-'70s, just because I loved George Perez's artwork. But this is the very first, and George Perez has said in an interview, this is rough. Okay, this is his first delve into, and I don't want that. There we go. This is his first delve into mainstream comics right here. Avengers 141, and he's got a little bit of run. It's Vince Colletta is the inker. Vince Colletta, in my opinion, isn't the greatest inker. He doesn't do George Perez justice, but as you can see down here, it says, and introducing our newest Avenging Ace, George Perez. So I'm going to do a little bit of a tribute here of my love for George Perez's Marvel stuff. Now, ironically, George Perez left Marvel in late 1980 and went on to DC, and famously he did the New Teen Titans, Raven, Starfire, Cyborg, all that stuff. That's Deathstroke. George Perez had a hand in all of that. And then he went on to do the big ticket item for DC in the mid-'80s, the Crisis on Infinite Earths, where they were trying to streamline their universe. And the work on Crisis on Infinite Earths, if you've never seen it, this George Perez here, a decade earlier, is unrecognizable with the work that was done on Crisis on Infinite Earths. I'm not going to bring up any images here of Crisis because I want to my big tribute to George Perez is his Marvel work. And he was very short-lived at Marvel. And I remember hearing the news as an 11-year-old kid that George Perez had left Marvel to go to DC, and man, I was hurt. I mean, we were pissed off. Me and my buddies, we all loved George Perez. John Byrne, George Perez, that was the two. That was the shit, man. Marvel Comics in the 70s. So let's look at a few things. My coffee has gotten cold. So, oh no, I don't want to zoom in like that. So let's, as you can see, this is more basic. This is a basic looking artwork. Still good for the day. It's still dynamic. You can see the beast right there. George Perez has a certain style. See the the weird lines, kind of putting the emphasis on the emotion on the face. That's kind of one of the things that George Perez is known for. But this is his very first, and I'm kind of showing this because I want to show you the improvement in his art, and the inkers make the difference as well. To me, George Perez's work is best done embellished by Pablo Marcos or Mike Esposito, and I'll show you what I'm talking about later on. But this is some of the early Avengers work. As you can see, Kang the Conqueror here. We'll zoom in here, and it's a little rough. I mean, it's a little basic. It's a little rough, but you can see a little bit of you can see where he hasn't found his style yet. And he even said in some interviews that during this time he was still trying to find his he was still trying to find his style. He was trying to find his flow. So, but I just kind of wanted to show early, and here's the Squadron Supreme. They originally were the Squadron Sinister. They were a kind of a takeoff of the Justice League. You got Hyperion here. It's a Superman. Golden Archer was Green Arrow. Dr. Spectrum here in the middle is Green Lantern. You've got the Wizard. And they're from a parallel Earth. So it was kind of an interesting little story run where you see the this is from 1975, where you see the Avengers battle this parallel team that's supposed to be kind of a mimic of the Justice League. You've got Lady Lark here, who is the Black Canary. Dr. Spectrum fighting the Vision here. He's got a prism that like hard light, like the like Green Lantern does. So, so that is the very first. Let me get off of here. Let's go back to. There we go. Now I can bring up another issue here. I'm getting all this off of Marvel Unlimited Digital. So that's Avengers 141. So let's jump ahead to my very first time seeing George Perez. The very first comic that I hope I have it here. Very first comic book that I ever witnessed, that I had my mom buy me at the comic book shop. Not the comic book shop, but at the grocery store. And I remember this. I have pored over this issue more than almost any other issue of Marvel Comics ever. And it's probably been 30 years since I've even looked at this. So this is kind of this is already bringing back the memories. But this comic book here, I believe this is a Jack Kirby cover here. Jack, like I was saying earlier, Jack Kirby came back into Marvel, and you see the cover art. Jack Kirby. It's a little dated. The art's a little dated on my in my view, but when you get inside, let's look inside here. Wind strikes Atuma. Now you can see you've got George Perez. This is basically a year later. This is my very first comic book that I ever. This is 1970. I believe this is late 1976. This is my very first comic book that I ever purchased. Ever had my mom buy me at the grocery store, and I had covered this in a previous episode. Was Avengers 152. That was not George Perez. So this is Avengers 154. This is 2 months later. And this is all wrapped into a big storyline with the serpent crown, with the living laser Atuma, the Atlantean warlord Atuma, and his henchman Tyrak, and then you throw Doctor Doom in there, and you've got Submariner. It's a big plot line. You see Jerry Conway. I guess Steve Englehart had been writing the book, but Jerry Conway. Steve Englehart, I guess, quit the book halfway through this big convoluted storyline. So all of this ties into numerous other comics. Supervillain Team Up #9. This took me a year as a kid to round up this entire story arc, to get the books. Because there wasn't any comic book stores. I had to go to grocery store and finally find to fill in the missing pieces of this story. But I remember this is the first time. This is when my love affair of George Perez's art started. So let's look at this and the improvement. Let's see who the inker was. I'm pretty sure it was Mike Esposito is the inker. Nope, Pablo Marcus. I'm wrong. Pablo Marcus. No one. My top 3 artist inker combos: John Byrne, Terry Austin, Frank Frank Miller, Klaus Janson, and George Perez, Pablos Marcos, excuse me, uh, just embellishes George Perez's art. Unbelievable. There's some other inkers that do him justice as well, but in my view, no one does him like Pablo Marcos. And you will see the vast improvement in the art. Here you see the vision. This is directly after, I believe this is directly after Avengers Annual number 6. One of the very first and very few Avengers annuals period that I ever bought, because the annuals were twice as much. They had twice as many pages, but they were also twice as much money, and my mom wouldn't buy them for me. So I really had to be on my best behavior for my mom to buy me an annual. It usually cost like 50, 60 cents at the time, when the normal comic books were 25 cents, 30 cents. So this is the Vision dropping the Serpent Crown into the ocean. Serpent Crown controls the minds of the villains. You know, the villains under the influence of the Serpent Crown, they can control, vast amount of people. So, and the Living Laser had gained the Serpent Crown. Basically, took a platoon of the U.S. Army mind control over, which we'll be looking at that issue here in just a few minutes. But as you can see here, Tuma's warship is attacking the Vision. I mean, just you can see the improvement already with the artwork and the Vision flying in. And I knew very little about these characters at the time when I'm reading this. I remember sitting down. I probably read this issue 100 times. Let's as you can see, the Vision is battling these Atuma henchmen. And I remember as a kid, this panel here where the Vision, the coolest power set. That I love the Vision as a kid. My two favorite Avengers were Wonder Man and the Vision. The Vision being able to control his density and partially put his hand in someone's face was just, that just blew here I am, an 8-year-old kid, and this just blows my mind. I'm just like, I can't believe a hero is doing this. He's just phasing into this guy's this guy's face and disrupting him. But they ended up getting the Vision with a sonic blast here. As it says right here, as we planned, Mako has drawn the Avengers' attention, leaving me free to slip behind the android and strike with some sort of a sonic laser. So let's go to the next page. Now, this panel here, as you can see, like a bird's eye view of all these characters. This is one thing that George Perez is known for. You can see Wonder Man's old green and red classic costume there. That's going to be significant here in just a little bit. But I just fell in love with like every panel of, you got to remember 1970, this is 1976, going into 1977. This right here is just, it was hard to see better artwork. Besides John Byrne, there wasn't any better artwork at this point in Marvel Comics. George Perez had really started finding his style here. Draws an unbelievably beautiful Scarlet Witch. This is the classic Scarlet Witch that I love. You can see here there's some sort of ship landing. Jarvis comes out. Jarvis wasn't an AI at the time. Jarvis comes out and he's going to protect the Scarlet Witch. And we see this Triton character, which is an Inhuman, and drawn beautifully by George Perez, by the way. And you got to remember, George Perez was also drawing a few issues of the Inhumans at the time. So this is right in his wheelhouse. As you can see earlier from Avengers 141, you see this background emphasis on whenever George Perez showed like a closer up of some sort of traumatic thing going on with a character. He always had that. He always drew this background like that. That's signature George Perez. Go on. He doesn't have his cape on. He's got like the slave pack on that's dampening his power, and you can see they can cause him a screaming agony. You know, if he gets out of line here. And you can also see with this panel right here, you can see his Jack Kirby influence. George Perez is starting to mold. He's got a little John Byrne. He's got a little Jack Kirby. He's blending the styles of some of the most well-known established artists at the time. Here we have Atuma, and he's got the Vision's cape on. And I always thought that was cool as a kid that you get to see Atuma taking Vision's cape. It's like, what happened to Vision's cape? It's weird seeing the Vision without his cape. But I mean, just look at this. I mean, that's just beautiful. Beautiful stuff by George Perez. One of my all-time favorites. I mean, this comic book right here is pretty much these scenes of like right here, the Avengers flashback battling the Submariner, all of this stuff. This is a page that really, really made an impression on me as a kid. We've got a Scarlet Witch here with Triton, but is it really Triton? You're not Triton, you're an imposter. And you can see more Kirby influence here as this energy wave just blows the disguise off. And you can see the first appearance of Tyrak the Treacherous, Atuma's right-hand man. And it's just a badass visual design. He's got kind of like the Atlantean Thor-like helmet. He's got the battle plate with these two nozzles that disperse sleep gas. He's got the claws. I just love this freaking this design of this character. He's got the armor, like armadillo-looking armor plate, and another signature George Perez art panel. As you can see, the debris. A lot of artists wouldn't take the time. That's one thing I liked about John Byrne and George Perez. A lot of the artists wouldn't take the time to draw the debris of the smashed Triton disguise costume, laying in the background on the ground right there. George Perez loved to draw debris. That was one thing he was known for. He was known for panels, like bird's eye view panels of a lot of characters, and he was known for debris. But I mean, look at the action. I mean, look at the depiction of the action. You almost don't need the words. You don't the flow of the art and the action. This is not easy to do. A lot of comic book artists try to make this work, but few did it as well as George Perez. And I think at this time he's just starting a little bit of a rivalry with John Byrne, because you can see they're both pushing each other at this point. Eventually, I'm going to do more. I've already fanboyed John Byrne in an episode. I'm eventually going to do a John Byrne, kind of a tribute to John Byrne with the early Iron Fist work that he did, which to me is, along with the George Perez Avengers stuff, some of the best to this date comic book art that's ever been, visual style that's ever been depicted in a comic book. So let's go on with the next. We've got Tyrak here, and Jarvis jumps on the back of Tyrak. Run, Miss Wanda, and she's like, Jarvis, you're gonna get killed. But I love the way George Perez draws the Scarlet Witch. So here we have, you see the sleep gas coming out, and the Avengers are busting through here. Yellow Jacket, Wasp, Beast, Captain America, Iron Man are busting through. Here comes the cavalry. I just poured over these panels when I was a kid. I mean, nothing DC Comics at the time was doing anywhere near stacked up to this. And this is one reason why in 1980, when George Perez went over to DC, I was like, maybe I should kind of follow him over to DC a little bit. I did not. I mean, every once in a while I would pick up an issue of the Teen Titans, but I just couldn't do it. I was actually mad at George Perez at the time because I just loved his work so much at Marvel. And you just see the Beast swipes Scarlet Witch from Tyrak. But this panel where Captain America throws a shield and Tyrak just catches it, it's like fighting you as child's play. And it's like, I can't believe there's a villain that's just boasting so much, fighting Captain America, Iron Man. Of course, they don't have Thor with him. He wouldn't be running his mouth so much if Thor were there, and the Scarlet Witch is already kind of down. So, and if the Vision was there as well, might be different. But as you can see, he always had George Perez always did the louver type effect on the repulsor rays of Iron Man. I'll show that in better detail when I get to a different issue. I'm not going to cover a whole lot of issues, but I'm also a fan of George Perez's Fantastic Four work. So I am going to cover one of my all-time favorite George Perez Fantastic Four issues. But let's get through the Avengers first here. And I know this is more for a YouTube video than it is for Spotify. This is, like I said, if listen to a Spotify podcast on Spotify, this is Avengers 154. Maybe I should declare that a little better. This is Avengers 154, but this was the panel. This is just an amazing panel. See Iron Man, Tyrak's down, Iron Man's getting on him, and he just smashes Iron Man's chest plate. This unbelievable visual. And Iron Man's like, my armor is dead. And Iron Man drops. You see the cracks in his armor. I'd never seen anything like that before. So, getting through this here, Tyrak makes short work of the Avengers. Captain America comes in. He's no match for Tyrak. Tyrak brings down the ceiling on him, and the Avengers are done, and the Beast runs. Okay, the Beast is like, this is one merry mutant who's getting out of here. I wasn't really that familiar with the Beast character at this time. I am just now delving into the Avengers. And so I didn't really understand what he was talking about, merry mutant. Later on, later on I learned, he's an original member of the X-Men, but so there you have it. And it says right here, our story continues in Supervillain Team Up number 9, and this drove me nuts as a kid. Took me a couple months before I could get my hands. I think I talked about this in a previous episode. Took me a couple months to get my hands on Supervillain Team Up number 9. So basically, Tyrak takes the Avengers back. They put the slave collars on them just like they did the Vision in a previous earlier in this issue. But this issue just cemented my just got my gears going for my eventual love of the 1970s, late 1970s Avengers. Really, this Fantastic Four and Spider-Man were my three jams in the in the late 70s, mid to late 70s. And George Perez's artwork was one of the big reasons. Unfortunately, George Perez did not have a consistent gig on any of these books, and he was more used as a fill-in. And it's very, very. I always hated the fact that I read one Avengers comic book that was George Perez, and then the next issue was drawn by someone like maybe Don Heck or Sal Buscema. I like Sal Buscema. He's done art on some of the coolest. He did art on the Graviton issues, the Graviton saga. One of the coolest. As a kid, I thought one of the coolest. Jim Shooter wrote that saga. But it would have been so much better if George Perez would have been the artist other than Sal Buscema. Don't get me wrong, I'm not knocking Sal Buscema, but he was more of a midline artist to me. I was always you had to buy the book to continue to keep up with the storylines, but it was always a shot in the gut when it wasn't George Perez. George Perez would do this issue here, that issue. So we go to Avengers 155, continuing. Private War of Doctor Doom. I think you can get all of this in an omnibus at this point, where it wraps up the entire story. Another Jack Kirby cover. But here we go. More George Perez, Pablo Marcus. Artists and storytellers. Gary Conway is the writer-editor. But we have, this is what happened after. This is what happened after the deal with Supervillain Team Up number 9. You can see the slave collar there on Captain America. You can see Iron Man has battled. The Vision still doesn't have his cape. And they kind of do some backtracking here, but once again, George Perez, and they do some fill-ins because maybe a lot of readers didn't pick up Supervillain Team Up number 9. It drove me nuts because I had to know what happened between all of this. I didn't know who these characters that were fighting alongside Doctor Doom were. I didn't learn that until later when you read through Supervillain Team Up number 9. An interesting thing about Supervillain Team Up number 9 was that was Jim Shooter. I believe that was Jim Shooter's only artwork. Jim Shooter actually gets credit for drawing that comic book. Maybe sometime I'll go through that book for YouTube, but for now, this is all about George. This is all about George Perez right now. So let's go back to, and I love the way he breaks down these panels. I love the way he shows in the middle here. You see what's going on the sides here, but in the middle you see the flashbacks of what happened from Supervillain Team Up number 9. So Doctor Doom basically defeats the Avengers. And I'm going to get to a panel that really, I love seeing all the Avengers here imprisoned. And this was really cool. This is one of the reasons why I love the Scarlet Witch, one of my favorite Avengers characters. Here she is with a broken arm. She got shot. Actually, not a broken arm. It's a gunshot wound from a previous issue. She levitates Captain America's shield. Not sure why they kept Captain America's shield on the loose out here, but all the Avengers have their slave collars on and they're all chained. and and Scarlet Witch levitates his shield, and she's like, I'm losing control of it. The shield's faltering, and I love this scene as a kid. Captain America, you see the skill of Captain America catching his shield, and then he ricochets. He takes the shield and he ricochets and hits the slave collar of the Vision. Now the Vision can alter his density and escape his bonds here, but the Vision doesn't free him. The Vision takes off. And you can see the anguish in the Scarlet Witch's. You can see the anguish in the Scarlet Witch's face. Like, why? Because Wanda, I hope to heaven I'm wrong, but I think your husband just abandoned us. And the Scarlet Witch is literally speechless. And as a kid, I was like, what happened? You know, what was going on with the Vision at the time? Later on, you see what happens. And here's this awesome splash page here of the Submariner, just in his full glory here. Prince Namor, the Submariner. The only time I had really been familiar with this character is the old Invaders comic books that every once in a while I'd read through. The art was horrible in the comic books, but nobody at the time for my money drew Prince Namor, the Submariner, like George Perez. So anyway, you kind of get that. And then you have Wonder Man come in. At the time, Wonder Man's basically my favorite. You've got Wonder Man and the Beast and the old style Wizard, not the Squadron Supreme Wizard, the Bob Frank Wizard, fighting Atuma. Warlord Atuma is still rocking the Vision's cape, but I love this scene. I love this panel where he's going toe to toe here with Atuma. Wonder Man's more powerful than Atuma. I mean, Atuma is an Atlantean. He's super strong, but he's not in Wonder Man's class. But the Submariner is. Namor the Submariner comes, and he thinks that the Avengers are fighting alongside Atuma. He thinks Atuma basically tricks him here and says, kill Namor. And they're like, huh? Namor's on our side. So you get to see an epic battle here between Wonder Man and Submariner, and you get to see the power of Wonder Man just flattening Submariner here. God, I haven't looked at this in I haven't looked at this comic book in probably 35 years, but I remember every panel. And right here, I mean, this is just classic George Perez. Wonder Man rips like a pillar support beam, and just he says, Wonder Man, don't do it. Namor knows the truth now. Little late. He goes, I'm not taking any chances, and Wonder Man just pummels Submariner. But all is well. They and then you see the Vision again confronting Doctor Doom and the private war of Doctor Doom. The Vision's explanation later on, they explain why the Vision abandons the Avengers, and basically the story gets all wrapped up. So those were my two first delving into George Perez. That was my first being exposed to George Perez's wonderful artwork. So let's go on to one of my favorite George Perez, and that is Avengers Annual number 6, which we're going to be backtracking a little bit. But I remember getting this issue later on, and this issue really cemented my love for George Perez's artwork. I know I keep saying that, but this is my tribute to George Perez. like I said, my second all-time favorite comic book artist. Let me there we go. Let's get back on the. All right, here we go. This is Avengers Annual number 9. This took me months and months to find. I finally found it. Later on, this kind of fills in the blank of the other two. Now you can see the difference in the artwork. The artwork is not quite as good as when Pablo Marcus. But here you see Wonder Man. This is one of the first times you see Wonder Man fighting the Beast. But this is the thing that really got me about George Perez's artwork. This battle scene with Captain America and Iron Man fighting. This I remember I love this panel here where Iron Man combines his repulsors and then he just levels this tank. And I believe this is Mike Esposito as the doing the inking job. But there's the living laser earlier with the serpent crown. This is basically what happened before Avengers 154, 155, the two comic books I just went over. So here we go, Chapter 4, Climax. It's got Nuclear, the Nuclear Man, and here's another George Perez staple giant splash page where there's lots of characters. They're bringing Iron Man and Captain America in, and here come the Avengers. Wonder Man, the Beast, and here's Nuclear lives again. Just unbelievable artwork. 1976. Just way ahead of his time. As you can see, Nuclear's got Iron Man and he's about ready to explode. And then the Wizard comes in. Nuclear is the Wizard's son. So, and as you can see right here, Atuma. So our story continues in Avengers 154. So I probably should have showed this first. This would have been, it would have cleared up a lot of things. But you can see right here, just debris. It's more George Perez, what he does best. Big action, big energy, big action panels, lots of debris, lots of characters on the page, and just awesome. But these aren't my favorite George Perez. I am going to show now my all-time favorite. I'm going to skip ahead. My all-time favorite George Perez issue, which has my all-time favorite panel drawn by George Perez. Might seem a little silly to someone. Like, why would that be your all-time favorite? Here we go. 1977, a year later, Avengers 161. And this is one of the issues that is George Perez is best known for his work at Marvel. So let's read through here real quick. Attacked by the Ant-Man, 1977. Oh, I didn't want to go that full. There we go. And here we go again. George Perez, Pablo Marcus. That last annual that was not Pablo Marcus. You can see the clean inking. The lines are so good. Pablo Marcus teamed up with George Perez. Just look how crisp and clean the art. James Shooter, the writer, Jim Shooter, would become the editor-in-chief at Marvel. He'd be behind the Secret Wars and all that stuff. So let's get in This is my all-time favorite panel. Wonder Man's new costume. And this just blew me away as a kid. I absolutely love this new Wonder Man. I like his look of the green and red look, but this panel is famous. George Perez. This is one of his best known panels. You can see the ants coming in, about ready to be attacked by Ant-Man. Hank Pym has gone through, he's had a mental breakdown. He supposedly doesn't know who these imposters are. I love the way George Perez draws close up of Iron Man. You can see his eye, you can see his face, his eyes expression. But this Wonder Man panel is just as a kid, this costume just absolutely blew me away. I loved Wonder Man even more. So here we go. They're like, why are you acting like we're strangers? And the Ant-Man has totally lost his mind. Hank Pym has totally lost his mind. I think it turns out that he's being controlled by Ultron. So Ant-Man attacks. He levels Captain America. Even ant size, I can pack a full-size wallop. I love this panel where Ant-Man, he goes, at least he can't hurt me. And then the Ant-Man retains his regular strength even when he's shrunk down to ant size, and he flips Wonder Man up basically flips him on his head. Just awesome George Perez work here. Black Panther and Beast join the fight. Look at this unbelievable action panel here where Black Panther and Beast are just leveled by Ant-Man. Not many could do action, visualize the action. Very, very hard to do in comic books like this. There's been very few that do it well, and George Perez was one of the top. John Byrne, Frank Miller, it's been a couple, but very few has done it as well as George Perez. Ants everywhere, just the little detail of the ants crawling all over. And of course, it takes the Wasp and her new costume coming in to stop Hank Pym. And you get kind of the backstory of what's caused Hank Pym's breakdown. They had it out for that Hank Pym character at Marvel. They ended up divorcing. He ends up getting domestic violence charges against the Wasp. In the early 80s, there's a big drama where Hank Pym and Janet Van Dyne end up getting divorced. Tony Stark actually starts dating the Wasp behind his back. They really had it out for the Hank Pym character. I'm not sure why the hatred toward the Hank Pym character. But there you go. These are just more classic George Perez panels, all the characters. So let's go. You see the Jack Kirby inspired energy, crackling energy in the background. Another beautiful panel. Let's fast forward a little bit here. And Ultron ends up taking Janet. I love the way George Perez draws Ultron with the energy crackling in the mouth. The way he depicts his encephalo beam. I just love that. Slamming the Vision. Another classic George Perez panel, energy. They just don't make comic books like this anymore. They just don't. The comic books that are coming out. Here's Iron Man trying to grab him, and he's siphoning off Iron Man's. I love the way George Perez draws Iron Man's face with the even behind the armor. You see the emotion, the encephalo beam that's penetrating the heads of the Avengers. Beautiful, beautiful Scarlet Witch panel here. Awesome. Making Ultron's short circuit. Man, I could go on all day about just classic George Perez. Now this panel right here, I gotta zoom in. This panel pretty much encapsulates everything George Perez. The bird's eye view, all the characters down, all the debris, the awesome hole in the floor. I mean, Avengers 161. And of course, the next episode the next issue is classic Bride of Ultron. I'm not going to go into it. Just this, I just kind of wanted to go over some of my favorite George Perez comic books. Like I said, I can fanboy George Perez all day long. Let's look at one fantastic, before I wrap all this up, paying homage to George Perez. I want to look, this is going to be, for me, a real trip down memory lane, and I'm hoping I have the right issue. George Perez did also, gotta remember, George Perez also did Fantastic Four. He was also doing fill-ins on the Fantastic Four. The two of the biggest books, Marvel at the time, in the top 10 selling Marvel comic books. Avengers, Fantastic Four. George was doing both of them. I mean, that's just unbelievable. Still early in his career. I mean, it's a shame they let George Perez go in 1980. I know he had fallings out. He felt like he wasn't being appreciated. But let me find Fantastic Four. Let me find the issue of Fantastic Four that really, really... this is one of them, but this isn't the one I'm looking for. The Fantastic Four issue, I believe, hopefully I've got it. I am going to say, I know it was 1977. This is classic Fantastic Four with the Salem 7. This is More unbelievable George Perez. He had such an awesome little run on. He had an awesome run on the Fantastic Four. Here is the comic book. Made a huge impression on me as a kid. Like I said, I had been much more into the Avengers than the Fantastic Four. After I had my mom buy me this issue in 1977, I started getting Fantastic Four monthly. And it was all because of this issue right here. More George Perez. And here's a different inker, Joe Sinnott. Joe Sinnott is, for me, not as good as Pablo Marcus inking George Perez, but he's right up there. So let me go to the full view here. This is the Fantastic Four coming back to the Baxter Building. I remember this after battling the Salem 7, and they've got the Impossible Man staying at their Baxter Building, and they come in and they see the Impossible Man. And no, I love the way that George Perez draws Ben Grimm. Very few artists get it right, and I love the way that it just looks. It looks like the rocks are stacked on there. It gives it depth. The Impossible Man is knocked out. So they are going to hunt what is going on in the Baxter Building. And here we go. I absolutely loved this issue as a kid. The Claw, the murderous master of sound. I love this panel with Ben Grimm's expression. You sure ain't gotten any prettier since the last time we tangled back in Fantastic Four 119. Lynn Wein. And we have the big battle here with the Claw and Ben Grimm. The Claw makes uh, a creature of living sound here. Ben Grimm smokes him. Apparently, my Sonic Beast was no match for you, Grimm. But right here, we see this mysterious character in the background, and it ends up being the Molecule Man. And right there, you see they've turned Ben Grimm basically into glass. Molecule Man really powerful with this staff that he has. I remember reading this issue over and over and over as a kid. I had read this was the very first Fantastic Four that I'd ever purchased. I'd ever had my mom purchase at the grocery store. But I had read old reprints of Jack Kirby Fantastic Four before this, but this was like a new, to me, just such a new and improved Fantastic Four at the time. Lots of action, beautifully drawn. Molecule Man and the Claw. I thought that was cool. Reed Richards had lost his power at this point, so he's using all sorts of technology. I just love the way George Perez draws the Claw. Avenger or Fantastic Four 187. They give a kind of a little backstory of the Molecule Man here. But I remember being such a cliffhanger at the end. And who is this? Who's coming in to save the day? And I love this character. They had a Fantastic Four cartoon later on. I think it was 1978, like a year after I had read this issue. But they didn't have the Human Torch in it. They had Herbie the robot, because I guess they had a problem with a flaming character on a cartoon. They didn't want kids. They didn't want kids lighting themselves on fire. But here's the Impossible Man just leveling Molecule Man and the Claw. So this was just an unbelievable action issue. I mean, the Impossible Man is kind of a silly character, but I love the way George Perez draws him. And he's kind of a cool character because he can basically do anything. So he matches the Claw's sonic creature here. But this was the big cliffhanger at the time. The Molecule Man Essence is trapped basically in the staff, but then I remember Reed Richards, and it took me a long time to, but this is the big cliffhanger. This was the big cliffhanger at the end, and I couldn't wait to get the next issue. And it took me a while to find that next issue, but this was just George Perez. I was in heaven with George Perez doing both the Avengers and the Fantastic Four at the time. So the only other comic book that I was getting on a regular basis was Spider-Man at this time in the 70s. And it was being drawn by Ross Andrew at the time, which is still my favorite Spider-Man. I'm unapologetically still my favorite Spider-Man artist. I know a lot of people will scratch their head at that. But anyway, that's kind of wrapping up my love for George Perez. I want to show one more little thing before I end this episode. One of the characters that I really love that George Perez created, he was kind of his swan song at Marvel, the Taskmaster. Here we go. Just unbelievably cool. character. This is 1980. This is right before, unfortunately, George Perez goes to DC Comics. He also had a hand. You got David Michelinie. Him and David Michelinie also created the Ant-Man character, the Paul Rudd, Scott Lang is what I'm trying to say. The Scott Lang Ant-Man character. So this is George Perez. This is Jack Abel as inker. I'm not familiar with Jack Abel, but I love the visual of the Taskmaster. Soon, George Perez would go to DC and create Deathstroke, and it was a purposeful copy off of the Taskmaster. He had left Marvel. He had a falling out. Not 100% sure what had happened. I know he felt like he was underappreciated at Marvel. I never understood why George Perez never. I never really understood why George Perez never got a full-time gig on one of these comic books. He was always shuffled between. He did some early Avengers in 1975. He had a little short run on 1976-77 Avengers. Had a short run on the Fantastic Four. He seemed to be more of a fill-in artist, and to this day, I still don't understand why he didn't have a full-time. He never really had a full-time gig. I don't know if that was something that he did or something behind the scenes at Marvel. But when he went to DC, he took over the Teen Titans. He wanted the Justice League. It's well known that George Perez had wanted the Justice League. He didn't end up getting the Justice League. He didn't feel like he was going to be a fit for the Teen Titans. Well, now we know that he turned around the Teen Titans, made the Teen Titans basically the X-Men of the DC universe. And the new Teen Titans went on to be basically their best-selling book. But then he went on to do not Legion of Superheroes. He went on to do Crisis on Infinite Earths, some of his best work. If you ever get a chance to look through, and I bought every issue of Crisis on Infinite Earths just because I knew George Perez did it. I would not really buy new Teen Titans. Every once in a while, I love what him and Marv Wolfman was doing with Teen Titans at the time, but I wouldn't buy them. Every once in a while I'd get an issue, but it wasn't Marvel. And so to sum it all up, it's sad that George Perez, what's happening to him right now. Like I said, he made that announcement, diagnosed with stage 3 pancreatic cancer. Just an absolute shame. So I never got to. I'm sad that I never got to have George Perez go. I never got to go to a convention and have him sign one of the. I would have loved to get a copy of a new copy of Avengers 154 and have George Perez, sign that book. But anyway, that's going to wrap up this episode. That's my appreciation of one of the absolute legends of the industry. I talked a little about some current stuff, kind of gave my feelings on the Eternals and the book of Boba Fett, what's going on with that. So anyway, guys, till next time, that's going to wrap up this episode. Hope you guys followed on Spotify. I am Crypto Count on Twitter. I will be posting this on my YouTube channel. I will have the YouTube channel is Count Chocula, and I will somehow probably I will leave a link on my Spotify to somehow link to my YouTube channel once I end up eventually getting this on YouTube, and hopefully from here on, I can put these on YouTube. So we'll see how that goes in the future. But you can always going to be able to find the audio version of this on Spotify. I believe I'm on. I don't believe I'm on Apple Podcasts, but I never went through that. Never went through that process. But I believe I'm on a few platforms, Stitcher and maybe Google. I think I'm on the Google podcast platforms, but mostly I'm on Spotify. So thanks for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed my little fanboying tribute to the great George Perez. And until next time, I will talk to you guys later.